Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. I hope you're all happy and healthy, doing the things you love. It's Friday. Happy Friday. It's the start of the Premier League weekend, the final Premier League weekend before yet another international break. I mean, I can't stand it. There's another one to come in a few weeks' time as well. I cannot stand it. But either way, we're not here to talk about that. Although I am going to say congratulations to Jed Spence for being selected once again for England. Good on you, Jedley King. We've got three stories for you today, guys. One is around Rodrigo Bentancur and his new contract. The other, is about Brooklyn Aric's takeover of Tottenham, the suggested takeover, the kind of quiet expression of interest, if you like, and how that's taken a dent with some news out from the Telegraph regarding one of his potential key members, the key stakeholders of his 12-man consortium. The Telegraph have reached out to one of those people and they have come back with some interesting insight. We'll talk about that. And also, transfer news views includes Tottenham turning their attention to a new number 9 that we've been linked with briefly in the past out of Porto and Portugal. And I got my sort of take on him as well. One of the best of the rest, but not necessarily as good under the hood as some people think he is. If you look under the details of when he gets his goals, etc. We'll talk about all of those things right now. Please do smash the like button for me if you enjoy the videos. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on a blinding light as I just turn on the light as we go through the show. By the way, this show is also available on Spotify and podcast platforms all over the place. So if you are interested in listening to it there or watching it there, then please check out the links in the description or just search for Spurs Talk Show. Right, let's get into it, guys. Let's start with Rodrigo Bentancur, shall we? Tottenham Hotspur can confirm that Roddy Bentancur has signed a new deal at the club. The Uruguay international has made 122 appearances for the club since joining from Juve in 2022. 28 years old. He started as Spurs ended their 17-year trophy drought by beating United in the Europa League final last season. Referring to Bentancur's new deal, he said, "I feel really good and I'm very happy to continue my story with this fantastic club. We have a new head coach, a new captain, and I want to enjoy many more years at the club." Thomas Frank has said, "I'm extremely happy that Rodrigo has committed his future to the club. It shows his belief in what we are building here and that we are starting a journey which we hope will be really special." Look, I'll just start by saying congratulations to him. The noise that there was umming and ahhing about a new contract was going on almost as long, if not longer, than Christian Romero's, who got his contract signed, obviously, in the summer. So it was obviously a little bit of a decision that had to be made there regarding Bentancur. All the quotes seem very positive. What I would say, if you have been watching my channel for a while, is I'm not that fond of Bentancur, not as fond of Bentancur as others. What I would say, I do think he has the best passing arrangement of all of the midfielders in our team currently. But I don't think that's a really high bar. I think that Pape Sarr is fantastic at certain things. I think he's brilliant at intercepting the play, interpreting where the game state is at, and using his footballing IQ and, of course, his rangy stride, his ability to cover blades of grass, and using all that stuff to be able to interpret where the ball is going to be and obviously do the interceptions. But then when he does go on those mazy runs, those breaks in transition, for me, the frustrating part about Pape Sarr is he often gives the ball away in the final decision. The final pass is either too overhit or underhit. With Berghvall, it's interesting. I love Berghvall to pieces. And by the way, I'm not criticising Pape Sarr. He's a young guy. He's going to have to develop, but that's the area of his game that is weak. And so comparing Bentancur to other midfielders that have problems with their passing, saying that he's the best passer isn't necessarily too much to write home about. With Berghvall, when he first came under Ange Postecoglou, my first takeaway of Berghvall was his ability to look up and spot the peripheral pass using his vision and be able to put the balls into the channels. It seems like under Thomas Frank, he hasn't done that. He's been sort of either it's a personal thing or it's a deliberate thing from the coaching staff that he seems to be more of a head-down driver into channels now. And obviously, he's being used in a variety of different ways, sometimes in the 10, sometimes in the 8. Same with Pape Sarr. And so neither of them really are writing home about, have much to write home about with their rangy passes just yet. Bissouma obviously leaving the club. I mean, most people think that Polinia when they came to the football club, thought he can't pass the ball. He clearly can. He's a very good passer in his particular role, but it's not what his main focus of his task is. With Bentancur, as I say, he's the best at what we have for that role of trying to find a pass, but I think he's too slow with it, and I don't particularly rate his utilization, his utility to be playing in the six. Whenever Palhinha is having a day off, I think Bentancur doesn't play well. And when Palhinha is playing and Bentancur's in front of him, I find that whole lack of creativity, that sort of slow pace to the gameplay, the game state, can be quite frustrating at times, especially as Tottenham are now trying to figure out how to get more output out of the possession that we have and how to use the ball more efficiently, I guess. And so I look at the situation and I think, look, I don't want him to leave for free, which is the other alternative. And I would hope that Tottenham tying him down to a new contract doesn't mean that he is therefore here for the long term necessarily, because if he is, and Palhinha is obviously or hopefully going to be made permanent as well, then I don't really see our midfield changing too much. We already have too many eights. We already have Archie Gray, who for me isn't a 6, he's an 8 for sure. He's clearly an 8. He doesn't fit the profile of a tenacious 6 that we need for our particular type of system. As I say, Pape Sarr and Berghvall are both favourites of Thomas Frank, and clearly there's loads more room for them to develop and grow, so I can't see them moving on. Bissouma will obviously be leaving the club at some point, but now Bentancur's tied down, it begs the question, how is it that you're going to find room for all of them if Xavi Simons is going to eventually fit into the 10, and if it is true that we also don't sell Decky and or Maddison, then you're going to have more options in the 10 as well. So there's a lot of minutes to be played, but there's a hell of a lot more sort of bodies to be taking up that 1-8 spot than is really necessary. And I don't think at this stage that any of them are really sort of head and shoulders above a good but not great standard. And so I would be more relieved if this was more of a let's just protect the value of the player. But then in the summer, maybe it won't be done in January, but in the summer, we go again and find a ridiculously higher standard of a playmaker and someone that can kind of control the tempo of the game, but has a little bit more zip and more bite. Someone like, for what it's worth, yesterday's link, Federico Valverde, would be a dream in that sort of role. And if so, then maybe you have to have a tough decision, a tough conversation around one of those three would arguably need to be let go. And look, we did it with Sonny. We tied him down to an extra year just to let him go in the summer anyway, and tried to get, and I think we got 18, 20 million pound out of it, something like that. So I would hope that that's the logic, and that really Thomas Frank isn't looking at our midfield and thinking, I don't need anything else from our midfield. We have enough, because I don't think we do. But either way, congratulations to him. And look, if he can get back to his very best from before his injuries from Matty Cash and that a couple of years ago, then hopefully we can see a kind of a more dynamic and more, I don't know, slightly more aggressive and faster paced version of Bentancur, because when he's at his best, he is very good, but I just don't see it often enough. And I feel like at the moment, as I say, I don't like him in the 6. And when he's playing in the 8 behind the only 6 that I do like seeing in that position, I think there's not enough creativity between those two. And the whole game seems a little bit slow, like we are playing in quicksand. Let's leave it there and move on to the next story, guys. And that is regarding Brooklyn Eric, the DJ NASA employee turned tech bro that has essentially turned into now looking at Tottenham Hotspur potential takeover bid. Remember, he put forward an initial expression of interest of a takeover worth £4.5 billion, 3.3 billion of which was to be for the purchase price, and 1.2 was going to go in as working capital to Tottenham Hotspur for their player acquisition and for the costs of things that were happening on the pitch. Now, that this was a story that was obviously unequivocally rejected by Tottenham Hotspur. They said it was unnecessary because we're not looking for a full sale, and it was certainly unsolicited. And Brooklyn Eric then played out the game on Twitter saying, "Was it unsolicited? You invited me to your football club to have a tour around the training ground and a tour around the stadium itself. All of these things that are kind of very much in line with what you would have for a person of interest." Or like a high-profile person that was going to be putting into investment. We've also seen in the last sort of 24 hours from Matt Law some narrative that that Daniel Levy was really the driver of that particular invitation, because I think there's some mixed messaging here. When Tottenham's new current owners, or the new kids on the block, was saying that it was unsolicited, and Brooklyn Eric saying, well, it wasn't, I was invited. Apparently, the current majority owners, the Lewis children, Vivian and Charlie, have never met or spoken to Charlie Arick. And so there is some suggestion there that maybe, if we're inferring and reading between the lines and looking back at when that particular itinerary that was shared by Brooklyn Eric that proved that it wasn't unsolicited, that was back in August when Daniel Levy was still at the helm. And so is there a suggestion that maybe Daniel Levy was sort of leading the charge for these things and going out on his own in seeking these people to come into the football club and to have a look around, with potentially coming, the potential movement being regarding some sort of investment in that capacity? And if so, again, I'm reading between the lines. I don't know the truth, but I'm just putting it out there. If so, is that one of the catalysts as to why maybe Daniel Levy's time was called to an abrupt end in September or in late August? Because maybe the Lewis children found that out and said, well, why are you doing these things without our knowledge? And who knows? Who knows? 2 and 2 together, maybe getting 4. But either way, the Telegraph did come out with an article last night saying that Tottenham Hotspur confirmed that they did have rejected a bid valued at around 4.5 billion to take control of the club, led by former DJ Brooklyn Eric. The approach arrived not long after long-serving chairman Daniel Levy departed, prompting widespread speculation about the club's future ownership. Eric has asserted that he could provide the necessary funds to complete a purchase when the time was right, and it was reported that he had assembled a consortium that included several wealthy individuals from the NBA and from the NFL world. Here's the interesting part. One possible participant was a man named Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, but his investment group, Rock Entertainment, has decided not to pursue the opportunity. In a briefing with the Telegraph, Rock Entertainment said it continues to review opportunities but chose not to pursue this particular UK-based property. The withdrawal of Gilbert, who is valued at about £21 billion, would be a significant setback for Eric, especially since the two parties reportedly had no formal affiliation beyond the initial proposal. Eric is said to have 12 investors lined up to join his bid. Now, it's interesting that that in this article, I've got another copy of it here via the Mirror. It basically says that they did, that the Rock Entertainment Group recently, this included, quote unquote here, quote, recently, this included the review of a major UK-based sports property. And after careful review, we decided and elected not to pursue this opportunity. So, on that basis, we can assume they're put 2 and 2 together again, and assume, without naming names from the Rock Group, that they did, in fact, look into buying Tottenham Hotspur, unless it was someone else in the footballing world or in the sporting world. But it seems like it's pretty obvious that that's the main story here. That Brooklyn Eric, one of those 12, was David Gilbert and his group, and they decided to walk away. So, in all likelihood, that puts probably to bed the notion of Brooklyn Eric coming forward with any improved bid, any improved offer, and the reality is it's going to be difficult for him to replace that sort of money if there was if that was one of the leading investors in this particular entity. Doesn't mean that there's not 11 others behind it. Maybe they can put up the difference. Maybe they can bring someone else in. I would just be very much I'd err on the side of caution here and probably assume that, given the Lewis's and the Tottenham Hotspur's official stance, given that they were going to get a number that was, miles above real value anyway, even the most generous of valuations, 25% higher than that, then it begs the question of who else could there be? And if not, I think it's going to be the Lewis's for a long time. We still haven't heard from Firehawk Holdings, by the way. The Firehawk Holdings guys, Roger Kennedy and his team, they haven't come out and officially walked away or officially or made any bid either, and they've only got 2 more days to do so, but those are Saturday and Sunday. So I would imagine that if it's not going to come out today, then it won't come out at all. So we can assume that one's dead. We know that Staveley is not doing anything, and now with this particular dent in the Brooklyn Eric story, it probably looks like it's going to be the Lewis children for a while. Whether or not that we're going to see the colour of their money of something of note. Again, I don't think £100 million really touches the sides with all of the different things that they need to fund and finance with regards to the White Webb's development, the phase 3 of the Northumberland Park development. I find it all a bit of a stretch. Let's move on, guys. One thing I would say, if you haven't already, go to Sean Butler TV. I'll put the link. I'll see if I can put a video up for you here, and check out the video I did yesterday regarding the takeover of Electronic Arts, the EA Sports franchise that does the FIFA franchise, all of those things, and they're already a major sponsor of the Premier League. They have been bought out in a record deal for a publicly listed company to be bought and turned private by a three-party consortium who are owned by the major investors in Manchester City, Silver Lake, the major or the primary owner of Newcastle United, the PIF fund, and a third party as well. That for me begs to be investigated. It has to go through a year's worth of competition commission rulings and making sure that everything's okay within that regard. But also the Premier League will need to review it as well. But I think there's a major issue. I think that with all those sorts of control mechanisms now being in the hands of the same people that own two particular football clubs at the top end of the APT's schemings, if you like, around football, go and check out the video. It's a fascinating one. And there'll be lots and lots and lots to chew over in that one. But Tottenham Hotspur, if they're going to be seeing now for the first time Newcastle United starting to kind of throw their weight around with regards to their resources and their financial funding, to be able to start to lean things into Newcastle United's ability to raise their revenues. And so consequently, if you thought that the PIF fund and Newcastle were a sleeping giant that was still asleep, you can start to see, I think they spent the last 2 years playing it very carefully, but now they're starting to move the needle a little bit. So Tottenham Hotspur are going to be in trouble and left behind unless they can get some serious funding of their own to be able to continue to raise their own revenues. And we have to make a move on that. Otherwise, if you snooze, you lose. And I think that the fact is that the rules regarding PSR and FFP are not going to change. I'll be doing another video about that on Sean Butler TV in a little while as well. So please go and check it out. If you haven't already subscribed to Sean Butler TV, the channel's been dormant for a while, but it's coming back strong now. So please go over there and subscribe. Link will be in the description. Let's get to the last story, guys, shall we? Samu Agahawa. This is the Porto striker, one of the great talents out of Portugal. Out of Porto. A proper player. And look, one of the last kind of number nines that really has not moved yet and was subject to move in the summer but didn't go. There's a lot of the nines have already changed hands. There was a hell of a lot of movement in the nine market in the summer. And so now it's kind of feeling like it's a little bit dry again. And Samu maybe is the only guy that's really out there, or one of the few guys that's out there that's left that still has that potential that where you can still get him at a decent value. Let's listen to the story first. So according to Spanish outlets, Tottenham Hotspur have their sights set on signing Porto striker Samu during the winter transfer window. The North London Giants have had a good start to the season, yada, yada, yada. The Brazil international has been inconsistent, talking about Richalison, and Spurs want a young profile to provide competition. The outlet claim they are targeting a winter deal for Agahawa amid his fine progress with Porto. The Spanish striker has an £87 million release clause in his contract, but Porto could accept a lesser fee for his exit. They are expected to hold out for a big amount given the striker has 4 years left on his contract. Spurs would also need to convince the striker with a promising salary on top of a starting role. I wouldn't be worried about his salaries in Portugal. We're not too good. Agahawa came close to joining Chelsea from Atletico Madrid during the summer of 24, but the deal ultimately fell through. He ended up joining Porto instead. He had a brilliant debut campaign with 27 goals in all competitions. The Spaniard has continued to impress in the Primeira Liga Giants this season with 5 goals from 7 outings. Agahawa has a strong physical presence and likes to win ground duels and aerial duels. He has the traits to suit the Premier League. What I would say, guys, is he is an absolute physical specimen, right? He's a unit of a guy. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. He's a little bit terrifying, similar to that fella that I referenced to you from Levante a couple of days ago. Really impressive physical specimen. And he does have some decent control. The only kind of pause for thought here I've got, and again, I'm on board it because I do rate this guy. I very much do. However, we have to look a little bit at the Portuguese league. I think you can't just assume that 27 goals there equals the same here. Similar sorts of question marks are being asked about Gyökeres, who got far more goals for Sporting than Agahawa, than Samu did for Porto. But it comes down to where do the goals come from for me. If the player is capable of scoring goals against the best teams, the Sportings, the Benficas, that kind of level, then I think that Tottenham can sort of take that stuff with a bit of a lesson. Or if he's doing it in the Europa League, Now, thus far this season, he hasn't scored in the Europa League. It's only been a couple of outings. Last season when he played, he didn't do. He hasn't done too much in the way of goals against the top teams. He scored 2 goals against Vitor Guimarães, for example, a goal against Nacional, 2 goals against Moreirense. Most of these teams were in the bottom half of the Portuguese league when he scored. He did score a goal against Benfica, who was second at the time, in April of last season. And but that's about it in terms of goals against the best teams. Most of his goals do come against teams that are in the bottom half of the Portuguese league. And the Portuguese league is kind of 4 big teams, and then the rest of them are nowhere near as good. So I just think it's worth pointing out that maybe we should do a little bit more digging on him. At 21 years old, though, the guy is an absolute physical specimen. The guy is an absolute unit. He's fast, he's tricky, he's technical. He can hit the ball with both feet. He's very, very good in the air. And he's quite intimidating. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. I think all of those things tick boxes, but I would really like to see him score some goals in the Europa League this season and in the Portuguese league before we go for him, and see how he performs against the biggest teams, because otherwise he could just be a flat track bully. And when you come to the Premier League, even the worst teams in the Premier League are not far off being, similar standards to some of the best in Portugal. So you need to see a little bit of a leap up before you can really start to just to assume that he's going to be able to make that transition. Let me know your thoughts, though. Last thing I'd say on him, like I say, is the fact that the market has got quite dry in the striker market, and Tottenham clearly need an improvement. And this guy is young, a lot of time on his side. I'd be more than happy to see it happen. But for me to get really behind it, I just want to see him score a couple of biggies against some of the big boys. Let me know your thoughts, guys. I'll leave it there. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always,